welcome everyone. This is an exciting session, and we're here first on purpose to add some enthusiasm and excitement to the get-together. So happy to be here in this beautiful location, looking out on the lake here. Wow, just goosebump stuff. Also close to the Watkins Glen racetrack, and I'm a huge race fan. Can you hear me now?
Much better. Take it. You can use it. You can take it out.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm honored to have Barry Carr here, and the two of us are going to collectively get you through this topic, which is not if or when, but now, as that statement relates to EV charging. Just a short while ago, EV charging was kind of a nice to have, you know, maybe I'll put one out there and see if it gets busy, and we'll maybe add another one in another 5 years, let's see what happens. Well, the ones that were out there 10 years ago are now gardens that are growing rapidly. The OEMs are investing $300 billion in EVs and batteries. Significant funding, and I like to add to this because guess who's working on the batteries? All the college labs. They're all figuring this thing out. I've even heard of a saltwater battery. We do have plenty of saltwater, not in this lake right out here. Infrastructure growth, here's some numbers. Right now we're at about 2.5 mil on the connectors to be installed. However, there's a need to have 13 million connections out there by 2030. So we've got some work to do, those of us that are in the industry. 90% of those will be level 2, 208, 220, that's where people live, work, sleep, shop. Prices of the vehicles themselves are coming down. There's a used market right now, and I'm here to tell you that it's safe to buy a used EV. They last a long time, and the battery degradation we're seeing is just fractions of what people were worried about. There are Teslas running around with 250,000 miles on them, and just the needle, basically the way you find out your car isn't quite going as far as your gas gauge won't go all the way up to the top. It'll stop at 7/8. So back to that quick point about the Teslas with 300,000 that are just going down a smidge. Barry, I'd like to invite you up to just make this a two-way discussion as we get into this, and then you'll shift right over to Barry Carr and the incentives available through the Clean Cities, and we'll be passing the microphone back and forth. Okay, so we said not if, when. Let's talk about now and how. EV charger options. There are many for you to be looking at out in the marketplace. I work for a manufacturer. We build stations right across the state line in Connecticut. We are right now producing 50 a week and scaling up to be able to crank them out at a bigger number than that. And that's pretty impressive, but that's just a drop in the bucket for what's really needed out there. It's nice to know that we're building them in Connecticut. We don't have to wait for them to come on a ship from somewhere else and be tied up where the containers can't be offloaded, so on and so forth. So we're excited to be helping you and this overall infrastructure build. Software. There are software choices. Open source stations give you the opportunity to load different types of software, whether it's for a specific fleet operation, full-blown public-facing software and service, reservation functionality. That is something that you want to be thinking about and asking about when you look into your charging station. Utility make-ready programs. We're certainly going to dig in deeper on the next slide for that. Barry?
Sure, I can talk about that. Yeah.
The equipment incentives, again, Barry. New York State and actually all over the country expertise, and both of us are your resource for that and ready to answer those questions. The engineering, getting ready to do this. It is a construction project, especially at scale, no matter which level of charging station you put in. And also how to avoid that, it's not a good word, demand charge. Because there are actual cases where people got hit with demand charges, and that's when your usage spikes from a stable up to here, and your rate could triple. And it doesn't just stay for those hours that evening, it stays that way for the rest of the month. So people have seen their EV bill and gone out and just turned everything off, and not only that, but they also sometimes go running off screaming into the night. It's a big bill, so we're gonna help you with that. Right here, now and how, we're gonna be talking about the Con Edison Power Ready program. We're gonna be talking about National Grid, and we'll touch on NYSERDA and its bucket, which is right now empty. Pass it off to Barry.
And then I'll just show my slides afterwards. Okay, I'm Barry Carr, by the way, and I'm kind of pulling double duty here. I function as the Executive Director of Clean Communities of Central New York. I live up in the Syracuse area, and I do that as a volunteer, but I work in this industry, and I work for a company, ABM Industries E-Mobility Division, and we are also a reseller of Juice Bar's product. It's a great product. We buy a lot of them. And so I work very closely with local utilities and state energy offices. So very quickly, what Power Ready is and what Make Ready is that your utility, and here you're either going to be a on-grid or national.
Engineering drawings, there's power capability, what do you have for capacity, even if you go down the DC route, what's available down the street at the substation, or coming up from the vault, under the manhole cover, or down from the pole. So there's some work to be done just to tee it up, and these make-ready programs and what you're seeing here from the utilities is robust. They pay for an awful lot of work, but there's a lot of time that goes through before you get these people, number one, to your location. You got to get the linemen out there, you've got the different people that bring the new meter, you've got your final installation team. So that is why I wanted to have a contractor here to kind of answer those questions, but I just want to present that case. So it's going to take you a little bit of time if you go at this big.
I had one that just took a year. Okay, Con Ed's Make Ready program. I helped a client in Queens, in Long Island City, bring in 480 volts to their facility. They are a livery company, so they are leasing out electric vehicles, Nissan Leafs that become Uber and Lyft vehicles for operators. So to put in two 480 volt chargers, they spent about, Con Ed spent about $600,000 because they had to bring the power from 2 blocks away in Queens. So it was a very expensive operation, but they get to recover that money from the ratepayers. So it's an approved program by the Public Service Commission, so you certainly should take advantage of it.
I got a quick question on the,
Sure.
on the incentives. I'm a project manager from the University of Rochester.
Okay.
We're working with RG&E, Rochester Gas and Electric, on the Make Ready program.
They're part of Avangrid.
Okay, so we're struggling right now. We're putting in about 84 ports across a bunch of different locations. They want to put us on the future-proof 10% incentive rather than the 90% for the non-disadvantaged communities.
Mm-hmm.
Any idea of a way around not getting put on the future-proof?
I know who you're going to ask. If you send me an email or text, you'll see my contact stuff at the end. There is a Clean Cities Coalition in Rochester, and David Keefe is the guy who runs it. He's a retired fleet director, I think, for the city of Rochester, and he would sit down with the utility, and I would also get my congressman involved or my state senator involved in that.
Okay.
We don't talk politics.
There certainly is some red tape and some fine print on these agreements, so you definitely want to have your legal look at them. And because we have experience in this room, we're going to tell you the flip side of this. Where can things become difficult? And this is an important slide. Poor user experience. These are your customers outside the hotel, in the municipality, on the street. You don't want them upset with you. General reliability and customer service is poor. This industry has seen that. There have been people that have come and gone already, and there are dead stations out there, so you wanna be careful. Hardware is tied to a proprietary network. I touched on that earlier. You wanna have options for your software, so you wanna pick a unit that is open source, where you can go ahead and pick the software, kinda like an unlocked cell phone. I like to use that. That's a good example. Or difficulty in integrating with your engineers, building management software downstairs. You know that they get cranky. They come in early and they go home kinda early, and if you don't tie in with their dashboard, you've got a cranky engineer. Equipment operating costs are high. Touched on that. That's really related to the demand charges. Poor design, underpowered. A lot of the early stations out there are pushing out 30 amps still. There are other options where you could, if you have capacity or if the utility's helping you, you can certainly boost that power, and the EV drivers pay attention to that stuff. They're gonna come and stay with you, work with you, charge with you. Poor cable management. You see the cables on the ground, winter's coming, it's not a good solution. The snow plows come, the next thing you know, when the guy drops that plow and pulls backwards, he's got the cord with him, or she does. So that's something to be thinking about. Eric, switch right to again.
Sure. Let's see if I can find it. Might have to put my glasses on here. There we are, look at that. Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna do this as quickly as I can because I wanna leave lots and lots of time for questions. This is the Clean Cities program. I was talking to you earlier, there are 90 Clean Cities coalitions in the US, and we're fortunate here in New York to have 6 of them. So depending where you are, there's one in Buffalo, one in Rochester, the one that's based in Syracuse that I'm the director of, one in Albany that's held within the transit agency there, one in New York City that's held within the New York City DOT airport space. Right now we're involved in installing 1,400 level 2 and DC fast charge stations at LAX and all the parking garages. So the trick to that program is ABM also operates the parking garage, so it's one transaction. And if you pull up with an electric vehicle with your fob, it will already know who you are, what vehicle it is, and it will assign you a parking spot that you'll go to. You get to the parking spot, a gate will come up at your parking spot, a camera will turn on that's on the charger. It'll scan the car to see if there's any dents or anything else in it, and apparently I saw a demo where if you were to take a gun out of the car, it will dial 911 while you're in the parking garage for any reason. And then when you leave the parking garage later on, it will do in one transaction, so only one bank charge to do the parking and the electric supply. The other thing to know about almost all of these systems, they have software in them that they are intelligent enough to allow you the choice of how and when you want to charge your car. So you're the parking lot operator and somebody like me pulls into the Syracuse airport, I'm going to be gone for 5 days. I may need 200 miles of range on my car. I'm going to tell you to charge it when it's least expensive, right? When it costs the least in the middle of the night. Whereas if I end up coming home 3 days early and I need to drive my car home, I'm going to, through an app, go to you and say, I don't care what it costs, the vehicle needs to be completely charged when I picked it up. So there is intelligence on these systems, and want me to mention vehicle to grid, just for the heck of it?
Sure.
Okay. Not sure if this will go into the parking world yet, but it will if you operate shuttle buses as well. Shuttle buses are kind of batteries on wheels, right? So if they're not being used, your local utility may want to utilize that electricity that's in there so they don't hit a peak demand period. And it's very prevalent in the school bus industry right now. So if you think about that, school buses go out at 6 in the morning and come in at 8:30. They sit most of the day. They go back out at 3:30 in the afternoon to take everybody home. And they sit idly all summer long. Summer is when our utilities peak here, okay, the electric utilities. So they become targets for vehicle to grid. The utility will pay the parking lot operator, the bus operator, the school district a fee to have the ability to take some of that current out of the battery pack. So it's pretty cool technology. This is who we resell for, and I know juice boxes on here. Oh, there's a juice bar right up here. And so the point of all this is we should all work together. What Paul said about open source software, I think that's extremely important. I know from putting in personally about 200 stations that went in during the Obama era, during, what do they call that? The the Recovery Act projects. We had about $13 million in upstate New York through NYSERDA. And we put in 168 charging stations and then a number more in parking garages. About half of them have been turned off by the operators because the vendor of the station is no longer in business, they're not supporting the software. So it is important to have choices.
Just one more thing about those buses, it's amazing what they can do. And after that hurricane comes through, it's, where are we gonna get power? The grid hasn't gone live again. Well, if you have that fleet of buses, you could set them up in strategic locations and go ahead and pump gas, run the police dispatch, fire department. So that big battery, or those big batteries collectively can become a microgrid for your community. On top of the give and take going back into the grid. I try not to get too far into the future because the here and now is also very important. How to do this, how to make it happen. Good time to open it up for more questions?
I have two quick questions.
Sure.
Tesla charging stations are pretty, I guess, more common than other charging stations. Is there any discussion about their charging stations being open up to cars like my Bolt, so I can charge at their stations? My second question is, for us that live in New York City, the challenge is charging our EVs in New York. It's a lot harder than, say, Long Island, where we have home charging stations. How do you see the solution for those people who want to drive EVs in the city?
It's getting more complicated every day, and I know that there's talk about people not being able to.
So if you have that and you are CCS, right, that's your connection, there is going to be an adapter to go from the Tesla adapter to CCS. For those of you who aren't into this as much, that aren't EV nerds like Paul and I up here. Oh, I should also back up for 20 seconds to say, although Paul and I don't believe we've ever met each other, we have both been to Watkins Glen at the same time, and there was an Allman Brothers concert, I think in 1971 maybe. So, I think he might remember more of it than I did. But in charging, in level 2, that we're talking about, it's 208 3-phase, okay? So think of your house like a dryer circuit or a range circuit. I have a level 2 station in my house, okay? Level 1 is 110 volts. Level 1 is essentially an expensive, intelligent extension cord, and it'll put 2 to 5 miles in an hour in your car. Level 2, the bulk of the stations you'll see that make the most sense, especially for parking areas, because people are there for a period of time, those are in the range of 12 to maybe up to 20, 22, 23 miles in an hour. They use an adapter, a jack that's called J1772. That's the universal engineering standard. For DC fast charge, these 480 volt chargers, there's 3 standards in the US. One is Tesla's own proprietary standard. One is CCS1, which most of the American and the European vehicle manufacturers are using. And one is called CHAdeMO, which the Japanese and the Korean manufacturers have been using. CHAdeMO is starting to go away. So when you go and see some of these new DC fast charge sites, we just put one in at a Morabito convenience store just south of Syracuse University off of Route 81. There are 4 DC fast charge units there. Each of them has 2 cords. 7 of the cords are CCS. one is CHAdeMO. And eventually that CHAdeMO will go away, but Nissan uses the CHAdeMO in the Leaf, so that's a big deal. So you're gonna see these adapters on that, but again, I think what the majority of you are going to be looking at are level 2 chargers, so J1772, every vehicle that's currently out there can use that.
How are we doing so far? So far, so good.
What else can we talk about?
What's the price point for, obviously we'd love to offer DC fast charging. But from my experience, the level 2 per port is $4,000 to $5,000.
Yep, that's a safe assumption.
DC fast charging is like 50,000?
A lot more, yeah, yeah.
So how can, being cost conscious as the university, how can we put in DC fast chargers to appease the customers that want them compared to the much less price point of the?
You as a university, if you were gonna put in DC fast charge, let's say you're close to one of these a major interstate, and the federal government is setting up these alternative fuel corridors all over the place, right? So there might be some funding to do it, but certainly the operator of the station, the software provider, the third party, or if you wanna do it yourself, you're going to want to defer that cost by charging anywhere from, I know that the delivery people I work with, they pay the New York Power Authority 28 cents a kilowatt hour to use their DC fast charge units at JFK Airport. Okay.
So are those, does the driver get charged per hour like you would?
He gets charged by, you can do it however you want. Some people charge as a service.
Okay.
So there might be a fee. Some of the earlier charge point ones are like that, right?
Yes.
You pull into a parking lot where at my office there's a charge point level 2 unit in there. It's $1 to plug your car into it, and then it's 15 cents a kilowatt hour after that. So there's a service fee which includes the parking. So you could actually include the parking, but again, it's completely up to you. In the early days, there were issues because you were selling electricity and you're not a utility. The Public Service Commission in New York State has changed that. They have not changed it in other states, so it's still an issue. So we're kind of ahead of the curve here, really. California leads in all this. New York is a close second. There is also a group called TCI, Transportation Climate Initiative. It's a group of 11 states plus the District of Columbia that all share their information on all things, all fuels, and I think that's a big part of this collaboration that has to happen.
Great. Yeah, and we just can't wait for the federal incentive to be rolled out to see how that will fill up existing buckets or how the new buckets are created. Because each and every one of you are talking to ownership and they're all gonna wanna know, hey, how can we make this happen and where are the incentives that are coming from Washington going to come to my neighborhood?
I'll tell you one more story because we still have time, unless more people have questions.
Just a comment.
Sure.
You're from the university, right? So, in my opinion, just, understand your motorist because a DC fast charge may not be the right choice. You might want to look at a level 2 charger because if you're getting a DC fast charge, it's very expensive
Yep.
for the buyer, it's expensive for the motorist, and you have to look at do they need a fast charge?
Right, so we have 13 level 2 chargers around now, putting in another 80 across all of our offsite locations and stuff. The level 2 seem fine for staff that are going to work, students that are on campus for the day, they have the time to charge. We keep getting calls and asking when we're gonna put in fast chargers.
Who's calling?
Staff.
Oh, no kidding.
I don't know if it's just because they want that reassurance that they're gonna be charged fast and be ready to go, or, but it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's interesting because I can see the people to me that would use it. There's an app like there is for everything else called PlugShare that shows where all the level 2 and fast charge units are in the whole country. You put in your zip code, it tells you where they are, tells you how much they charge per kilowatt hour. It tells you whether you have to have a separate app for it or what kind of credit card it takes, that kind of stuff.
Passengers.
Correct.
I guess electric vehicles were futuristic at one point. This seems incredibly futuristic that you're
you're gonna have some connector drop down on a lever and charge the bus. while
Yeah,
sitting
it's
in the
using,
bus.
it's using induction though, so it's not actually touching it. So the
Okay.
current's being transferred magnetically. So in there, the driver has, there's a little map on it and there's an X on it and it changes colors when he's in the right place. He or she's in the right place. And then they can rapidly charge that. I worked on a project down in Tampa with a transit agency there a couple of years ago to do that. It's pretty cool technology.
It
So,
seems like it, yeah.
yeah, you can also do that in parking garages. So you can put a pad down in the parking spot and you can charge wirelessly that way. So you can put, just like you can charge your cell phone wirelessly. It's pretty much the same technology, and it's a third party, but they work with Juice Bar and ChargePoint and Blink and Rhombus and everybody. Yeah, they get along surprisingly well, all the different vendors, because they all own it together. I will say, kudos to Paul being manufactured in the US, because in the infrastructure program, there are Buy American statutes. And you're even seeing some, I know I have to deal with a company that's a famous German company that I will not mention, but they're building a factory in the US right now in anticipation of all this stuff. Yes.
Eric, I just want to, as it relates to clean cities, just for everybody in the room maybe, is that I've been working with clean cities in Albany for like 14 years, and of all the funding I've received through two universities that I've worked at, really it's something that all of us in this room can be involved in. What we do in Albany is essentially that's a quarterly meeting, but really, again, a lot of the funding that we've been successfully able to obtain, we've transitioned the fleet of gasoline buses to propane buses. We've received electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging stations. So, and it connects you with all the people in your area that are working on the same things. You'll actually understand that a lot of things you're working on will be back from one another. Oh, that's that person, or that's, and it kind of connects everybody. So instead of talking to as a lot of times, it's you really get the direct person. So I would put a serious plug in for clean cities in your region for anybody in this room to be involved with, because the funding opportunities available have saved, the two universities I've worked at thousands and thousands of dollars, and we're still getting the return on investment on a lot of those things that we instituted. So it's outside of New York State Parking and Transportation Association. Clean cities is one of those things that actually I limit what I do outside. You can only branch out so much, but clean cities, I would tell you, is definitely worth your time. And again, within New York State, they're in those 6 regions, so really there is something close to the majority of our members. So it's really a great program and something that will save you a lot of time, save you a lot of money, and actually in a lot of instances it'll increase your revenue and decrease your expenses for those regulations. So definitely great work.
The clean thing, I didn't pay you for that, right? But the thing to, I like to say the Clean Cities mantra, let us connect you with people who have already made mistakes so you don't make the same mistake, right? Because that's kind of how a lot of this happens. But remember, this is an appliance, so you're putting in an electrical appliance. It is a construction job, it is a civil engineering job, it is an electrical engineering job. And if you take nothing else away from this presentation, next time you're repaving, you better be putting some conduit in there, so you're not digging it up again, right?
Big pipe.
Yeah.
And I'll just add, Clean Cities is fantastic. When I saw that Barry was gonna be here, I said, oh, thank God, because it is so hard to keep up with all the incentive dollars, and that is exactly what Clean Cities does. A Google search will bring you to all the different manufacturers' websites, but they're not always up to date because sometimes they hold back on that latest one. They're out there pushing marketing out to try to sell and win that business. So Clean Cities is agnostic, and I'll just say that they're just fantastic. I try to get involved with them as much as I can.
Yes.
Got a comment and then a question. So you mentioned about putting conduit in. I am aware, and correct me if you know anything further, that there are some credits towards meter certification with EV charging in parking lots, and it doesn't even have to be that it's a station. It can just be that you're pre-wired for stations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's true, that's true. I'll give you another anecdote on this. So you talked about LEED certification. Yes, electric vehicle charging or planning for future charging is a menu item in the LEED certification. The other thing is, I worked on a project a couple years ago with the Port Authority that runs the bridges and tunnels and airports in New York City. And they're faced with these mandates that even their employees are being pushed to buy electric vehicles. So they're going to give them free charging at the site, but they didn't have the capacity to do it or the space to do it. And so what they did was they upgraded their lighting. They had high pressure sodium lighting in the parking lots. They upgraded it to LED that had enough excess capacity to hang level 2 chargers on the streetlight poles in the parking lot. And it worked out really well for everybody.
And then the question I had, so I'm located down in Tampa myself, and I know Duke Energy has a program, and maybe you touched on this already, excuse my ignorance, but they'll pay the capital cost to install a charger, and then they are technically the operator, but as the parking operator, you get to have that amenity free of cost. Is there something like that?
There is something like that, and I think that's done through an unregulated subsidiary of Duke Energy, and that with gasoline. That's the difference. But again, remember, when you're in the commercial business, remember what rate you're at. Remember to negotiate with your utility. You heard me talk earlier about this project in Long Island City. Con Ed first came back and offered to pay for 50% of it, and me as the representative said, well, there's not going to do it then. So then they came back with more money, because there's great value to the utilities to be doing this, because they're going to be selling you those electrons forever.
I could add, in a recent meeting with Eversource, it's okay, they said that this is bigger than when air conditioning hit. This, what we're talking about, the electrification of transportation, is bigger than when the utilities were faced with air conditioners.
So they got pump the heat sound in my car?
Yes, you can. And you'd be surprised. So there is sound to an electric vehicle. I drive a plug-in hybrid because I'm a person. I still drive to Washington and live outside of Syracuse. When I put my car in reverse, it sounds really like a spaceship. It's a scary noise just in case somebody's behind my car. And even going forward legally until that car, I think, is going over 12 miles an hour, there has to be sound coming out of it. But you can only go to New York City where you live. There could be a diesel truck pulling into an intersection. Somebody's still going to walk in front of it, right? People are still clueless. Somebody's texting, walking on the sidewalk. It's not going to eliminate that, but the industry recognizes that we still need sound. Hey, this was good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.